Hello, everyone. I'm hoping you're having a fantastic day wherever you are listening to this recording. My name is Tom Miller, and I'm here today to talk to you about a call to action. A call to action that I began 5 years ago. This is the fifth anniversary of my opportunity to write my dissertation on the characteristics of effective public charter schools. And 5 years from now, still utilizing every day, still having great opportunities, great discussions with leaders. But I was sitting back and I was really thinking about, what I have learned about leadership over the last 5 years. And what did I learn from that dissertation study that is still impacting my life on a daily basis, and I know your life as a charter school leader. So I wanted just to talk about some things that I've learned and over the past 5 years. And number one, the hardest person to lead is you, right? I mean, I know that the hardest person to lead is me, because every day I have to learn how to be diligent and stay focused. I'm a big idea guy, so it's really important for me to stay balanced with my ideas and make sure that I execute all the way through, and also that for the individuals around me. So that's one big piece. Really important for leadership is to stay really focused and make sure you're not getting too far outside of the box. Number two, being the filter. I wear my emotions on my face. I certainly have rubbed people the wrong way through not always being the filter. I'm not an outstanding filter, but I certainly try to get better every day. And what I mean about being the filter is, as a leader, you don't have the right to complain down. You don't. You don't want your people complaining down. When you complain down and it trickles down into your organization, it certainly makes a significant impact on culture. So being a charter school leader is really difficult because you really don't have many people to complain to, right? You have your board, and that's pretty much it. So being the filter is really challenging. So make sure that you are definitely carrying the right emotions when you walk out into that car line or whatever it may be that might be bothering you. If you are someone who wears your emotions on your face, certainly take that time. I have heard if you stretch out your arms like this, before you walk out, it actually opens you up. So if you see me walking around like this with my arms, like a bird, you'll know that I'm going to practice being the filter in a moment. Number three, making decisions. Making decisions is so important. Um, that's an understatement, right? As leaders, we make hundreds of decisions every day, and not all of them are great, right? But you need to make decisions in order to move forward. And most importantly, when you make a decision, if it doesn't work out, you've got to evaluate why. Where did your decision making go wrong, right? Because it's about that evaluative expertise that's going to make you a better leader. So really important. Making decisions is critical for your people, okay? Bringing in as much information as you need to move forward, all right? Trusting your gut, trusting your intuition, using mentors, using the people around you, using resources, all very important. But you got to be able to make decisions, all right? Because without vision, people will perish, right? They they don't. There's no trust. You got to be able to make decisions. And this is a big one. Learning how to say no, right? So the mentor group that I'm in now, we always talk about learning how to say no to the good so you can say yes to the great. So learning how to say no is really hard. You got to value your time. We all have the same 24 hours per day. So learning how to say no to things is important. You can't please everybody, and if you try to, you're going to please very little. So take the time each day to making sure you're staying focused, going back to leading me, right? I've got to lead me. And part of leading me is being able to say no. And actually, you might be helping someone out on the other side, right? Because sometimes if you say no, that actually takes them off the hook. Number five, really difficult as a leader, balancing being a great father, a great husband, while also leading a business. So it's really challenging that we figure what that is. And I don't believe there's such thing as a work-life balance, but I do believe there is a passion balance, right? Because if you love what you do on a daily basis, it's not like work, right? And especially if you can bring your family involved in some of those opportunities, that definitely helps, right? So just make sure. Hardest thing for me is when I get home, put that phone away, put that smartphone away, turn it off, and make sure you're being present. Make sure you're being present with your family. My last one, patience. Not always a very, very patient person, but I understand you have to enjoy the process moving forward. Okay, so definitely in our world of instant gratification, practicing patience is critical, especially understanding, right? Because we're seeking to understand first, beginning with the end in mind, right? But being patient in order to get there. Because if you haven't provided the coaching and the resources, the plan, right? The clarity, then you're the problem, right? So you always have to think about, what role do I have in this problem, right? So those are 6 things that I've really learned over the last 5 years as a leader. And what I want to do is I want to share this call to action with you that I wrote 5 years ago that is still on my mind, still very, very relevant and significant here. And I'm going to end with this before I move forward. As I've learned through the John Maxwell team, that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less, right? So I found this great quote from the author of Starts With Why, Simon Sinek, and he said, leadership is a responsibility. It's not a rank, it's not a position, okay? It's a responsibility. So as I'm reading what I learned in my dissertation 5 years ago with my call to action, I want you to be thinking about your responsibility as a leader. Okay, your responsibility as a leader, and how much are you paying attention to these aspects of the characteristics or the components or the tenets of a effective public charter school. Because with multiple responsibilities in your life right now, a realistic strategy for most of you is, for your strategic plan or your school improvement plan, is we're not really sure where we're going, but we know any road will get us there, right? How many school leaders have you talked to? What's your strategic plan? What's your school improvement plan? What are your goals? What are the goals of the organization? And a lot of them, they just don't have them, right? So I just love, my son Matthew's 3, and there's this Winnie the Pooh story when he's going rambling with a Piglet, and Piglet says, hey, do you want to go for him? Oh, I'd love to do that with you, Piglet. Where are we going? And Piglet says, I'm not really sure. And Pooh says, well, I'm sure we'll get there then, right? Is that not the strategic plan of many schools? We're definitely going to get there because we're not really sure where we're going, right? If you don't have a target, you'll never miss. So without clear planning and knowledge, school leaders can feel really lost when you're building an effective school because you're so involved in everything as a charter school principal. So it's critical. It's critical for you, just like we've been teaching since August during these sessions. If you've been part of them, building teams, having clarity in your communication, knowing exactly where you're going so you can continue to beat that drum, right? Just like the Carolina Panthers, beat that drum and keep making the progress to get there. So if you were to write a want ad, right, for a descriptive manual to give your school the formula to negate any of these issues, right? What would it look like, right? So this is when 5 years ago, I was like, so what does this look like? Is there even such thing available? Because that's what I set out to do, was to draw up a manual of what an effective school looks like, and any school leader could take these, whatever they are, these objectives, these characteristics or these tenets, and just be able to implement them, and their school would be effective. And what I found was that, this was written almost 40 years ago by Ron Edmonds back in the early 80s in urban schools. He and his team studied hundreds of urban schools, and they developed a manual that turned into the 7 correlates of effective schools. Right? They were in these schools of high economically disadvantaged students, and they discovered these 7 attributes, these 7 correlates. They've been proven over time, and many other researchers have actually grabbed a hold of them and used them for their own studies. So here are the 7. Edmonds' findings was that there was a foundation of high expectations, strong leadership, unwavering commitment to learning for all, collaboration, differentiated instruction, and frequent monitoring of student progress. These were the 7 original correlates, and they've been rewritten multiple times by multiple researchers. So what I found, so my study was 5 schools, 5 public charter schools: Maureen Joy Charter in Durham, Community School of Davidson outside in Mecklenburg County, the Mountain Community School in Henderson County, the Greensboro Academy, obviously in Greensboro, and the Franklin Academy here in Wake County. These were the 5 schools that I spent. I spent months in these schools, interviewing school leaders and teachers and doing observations to try to see if I could align, like what made these schools so effective. And these schools were effective based upon a criteria of making high growth for a certain amount of years in a row, and also keeping their honor schools of excellence for repeated times. And so the five attributes that I pulled out, okay, were each had a sustained school vision. Okay, sustained school vision. We're going to go deeper into each of these in a second. They had student personalized, student focused instructional planning, right? They had an individual plan for every kid. Strategic personnel decisions. They had multiple levels of parental engagement, and they also had site-based budget control. These were the 5 overwhelming characteristics, right? So this is a charter school, right? I mean, this is not a big deal to you. This is a charter school. Sustained school vision, student-focused instructional planning, strategic personnel decisions, multiple levels of parent engagement, and site-based budget control. When you write your charter, you're like, yeah, that's it. No big deal, Tom. So we got 158 schools. How many could say they're experts in 1 or 2 of those categories? Is your school high flying in those 5 categories? So let's keep talking. All right, remember, we're paying attention. We're paying attention, we're reflecting, we're putting our smartphone away, and I want you to sit and I want you to think about where your school is when we talk about each one of these. See, because the ability of charter schools, right? The best strength that we have, the best weapon that we have, is the ability to make real-time decisions on school improvement and initiatives, right? I mean, honestly, that is why we, charter schools, are so effective, or can be so effective. Because we can make decisions on a dime. We can change our calendar, we can change our instruction planning if needed. We can remove that, one teacher or school leader who's not meeting their promises, right? We can make quick site-based decisions. We're in control of our budget. We're in control of our education plan. We're in control of our school day. Right? So that's really important. Pay attention to that. Because remember, I talked about how decision-making is so important as a leader, right? So when you think about these 5, remember, leadership, right? We have to look at these characteristics in a telescopic manner, long-term vision. Telescopic, right? but microscopic. Telescopic for distance, but microscopic, so we can analyze and make sure what's working and what's not, so we can make those instant real-time decision changes. Okay. So, of the 5 charter schools that I studied during that time, amazingly, 4 still had the same initial founding school leader. 4. And each one of those schools had been around for almost 10 years. Because Community School Davidson was a private school conversion to a charter school. So 4 of the 5 had sustained vision, right? It was the same person. It was a person who came up with the idea, wrote the charter, got this school going. Now, 5 years later, unfortunately, only 2 of those schools still have the same leader. But all 5 schools still very, very successful. But only 2 of them still have the same school leader. So it was so clear to me during my study that the overall vision drove your school improvement decisions, right? Your mission and your vision drives your decision making because they have an understanding of what it is. There's clarity. Also, there was minor adjustments to the school's overall curriculum. Minor adjustments. Tweaks. We're not talking about major overhauls with curriculum. If you walked into the building and said, hey, what do you all use to drive your curriculum? You would have a clear answer. Oh, we're a project-based school, and we use, core knowledge curriculum to drive everything we do. Or, Community School of Davidson. We use the basic school model, which is a study based upon relationships. We have a very small teacher or adult to student ratio. It's between 6 and 10 to 1 in most classes. We loop every grade level, right? So K1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Our educators are responsible for the development of the curriculum. You didn't hear, well, in one grade level we use Engage New York, and another grade level they just kind of stick to the Common Core, and then this teacher over here learned how to use Saxon's math really well, so they're using Saxon, and no, you don't hear that. There is a telescopic outlook on what the education plan will be and continue to be over and over and over, no matter what the state or the federal government says. This is who we are. This is what we teach. These are our non-negotiables. And we make minor tweaks to make sure it's meeting the personalized needs of our kids. We don't fall for the shiny lure. We don't make changes based upon that. Okay. Also, staffing. Staffing was so critical, right? So this goes back to the site-based budget control, being able to hire effective personnel. I didn't say teachers, personnel, right? Members of your team. Everybody's part of the team. So whether they had a teaching license or not, maybe they came in from a university for a year, maybe they were like a chemist, right? Would you want them teaching your science class? Yeah. Maybe they're a professional athlete. You want them as your PE teacher, right? You had these opportunities, right? So they had purpose behind all of their hiring process. And all of them said, all 5 of the school leaders said specifically, they had to fire great educators that just didn't fit the school's vision anymore. They fired great educators. They said, Tom, we had great teachers that we had to let go here. They just didn't fit our vision anymore. They didn't fit our basic school model. They didn't fit our small community school model. They didn't fit our direct instruction model. They didn't feel it was, what they were good at. or they didn't want to collaborate with their peers. They didn't care that they got levels 4s on all of their EOGs. They fired them. Well, they let them go. Can you say that? Can you say that you have an understanding of each one of your teachers to know whether they fit in your vision, in the school's vision, in the school's culture? Because remember, your culture is the worst behavior that you'll tolerate. 5 years ago, I was a middle school principal, and this was my hardest year ever 5 years ago. I had massive turnover. I had 4 teachers in one class in 1 year. I had a couple teachers that didn't last 2 months. I wasn't very good at making sure that I was recruiting individuals who believed in our philosophy. They were good interviewers, so they certainly did act as though they were going to love the model. But they weren't good for the culture. And what I learned is I was losing credibility by keeping those individuals in the organization. That's really important. So here we go. Let's talk about my 7 correlates, my 7 characteristics. Okay, it's based upon what Ron Edmonds and Lazat and Schneider. I mean, all these groups. And feel free to read my dissertation. There's a ton of versions of the 7 characteristics of effective schools. Here's my 7 characteristics of effective public charter schools, K-8. Okay, because I only studied K-8 schools, but I'm pretty sure these would work everywhere. Number 1, shockingly, clearly define the learning organization's mission and purpose so all stakeholders are aware of the expectations. A clearly defined organization, mission, and purpose. It brings me to Patrick Lencioni's book, The Advantage, when he talks about the 6 characteristics, or this, 6 questions towards organizational health. Question number 1, why do you exist? Question number 2, how will you behave? Question 3, what do you do? Question 4, how will you know you're successful? Question 5, what's most important right now? And question 6, who's responsible for what? I love it, right? So going back 5 years ago, here was my number one that came out of there. Clearly define the learning organization's mission and purpose so all stakeholders are aware of the expectations. How do we measure that? How do you measure that? Do you know your school's mission more than just a seance? Does your mission breathe in the hallways? Does it permeate the culture? Let's look at number 2. This is my favorite. Expand leadership roles and professional opportunities for your teachers, staff members, and community stakeholders. What does that sound like? Oh yeah, building a team, right? Expanding leadership roles and professional opportunities for teachers, staff, members, and community stakeholders. What does this look like at your school? I'm not saying you got to give people titles. Some people love them. But you should be spending time individually with your people. Find out, what do they want to, where do they see themselves in 3 to 5 years? Because you've got to build opportunities for them to feel successful in your organization, right? To feel like they're part of number 1, of the clearly defined mission. How are you doing that? How are you growing from within? Because that's what's going to sustain the vision. Because remember, I told you, now 3 of the 5 school leaders are gone from those 5 schools. Yet those schools, all 5, are maybe more successful now than they were before. How do they do that? What are they doing to build leadership capacity? What are you doing to build a leadership capacity? What are you doing to identify the next leaders? Because remember, leadership is not how far you advance you, it's how far you advance the people around you. So, if you're not doing this, here's 3 ideas. Number 1, spend a lunch period with, well, first of all, you got to make a list. Make a list of your top 10, right? Because remember, we should be spending the majority of our time with our top 20% of our staff, even though we usually spend our most time with our bottom 20. Spend it with your top 20. I guarantee you'll see better results. Guaranteed. So make a list of who they are and have lunch with each one of them. Have lunch, right? Buy them lunch. Sit down with them. Find out who they are, what makes them tick, what makes them laugh, sing, and cry. Where do they want to be in 3 to 5 years? And ask them, what could they do? What would they like to do in your organization? Right? What types of things? Maybe they want to be a curriculum specialist. Maybe they want to be a principal. Right? Maybe they're just really happy with being in their classroom. So sit down with them, find out what those things are, and say, "Yep, I love that. Could you write me the key results areas? Like, if we created that job, what would the key results areas be? What would they be?" And have them write their own job description for it, right? And say, all right, we're going to build this into our budget next year, and I want you to go for it, right? Take a risk. Take a risk on your people. You have to take those opportunities. I know at Community School of Davidson, they have principal for a day, and they've got 10 or 12 teachers that apply each year. And they build a list of administrative duties, right, that these folks would do. So the one day per month, they come out of the classroom, they get a substitute for the class. They come out of the classroom, and this person's responsible for the same administrative duties everybody else would do. Maybe it's investigating, a behavior or an incident on campus. Maybe it's calling about like the copier contract, whatever it is. It brings them out of their class. It lets them see the bigger picture of the school. And it lets them know whether or not they want to rise in the ranks of the school. So if you're talking, 10 days a year for subs, right? So what's that? 1,000 or 10 days a month? That's $1,000. So for $12,000, you're giving your staff the most incredible professional development experience of their life, because you're building their capacity to understand the school at a bigger picture. All right, number 3. I'll go off on number 2 all day long. Number 3, provide a safe learning organization conducive to student learning to build a strong student base and limit student attrition. Why is that important that we limit student attrition? These charter schools that I studied each had a wait list that was double their actual population. Why? Parents don't choose charter schools because of the academics. They choose it because they know it's a safe environment, smaller environment. People it's built based on relationships. Principals can actually get to know the kids. The teachers get to know the children because they don't have 150 on their caseload. When you limit attrition, you manage your resources better. Right? What I learned as a principal, middle school, 6, 7, 8, we had a heavy attrition rate in 4th and 5th grade. Figuring out they don't want to come to our middle school. Why? Because the parents didn't know what was going on there. Okay, there was all these rumors and these perceptions about how awful it was and how awful the kids were, and there was fights and all this stuff. So we had to do a better job of educating the 4th and 5th grade parents. We built relationships. We reached out. We were a bridge, not a watchtower. Because I realized that when I had attrition, I had to replace those students. And you know what it's like replacing 6th and 7th and 8th graders in your middle school that have been in the school system or wherever else for 4 or 5 years and transient. It means I had to take all my resources that I had already set for my kids that had been there for a long time, and I had to move them to these other students who were probably going to be transient anyway. You got to limit student attrition. You got to build a strong learning environment. Communicate with clarity and be consistent. Number 4, grow sustainable, actively engaged relationships with your parents and the community. If you don't have clear roles and responsibilities for your parent volunteers, they will be a burden. If you have clear roles and responsibilities and non-negotiables and understanding, your parents will be huge for you. Fundraising, covering classes, coaching, being volunteers in the classroom teaching classes. Lunch coverage. A lot of the schools, like I know 2 off the top of my head, Magellan and Explorers. Their teachers get half a days every week, so the teachers can go out and do their lesson planning. You know who covers the class? The parents. They had so many parent volunteers, they'll come and cover the class. At Explorers, we have explorations. We go and we teach classes to the kids, based upon something. It could be, we do a leadership class. There's a robotics class. There's dance classes. There's arts classes. You got parents volunteering or community members volunteering to teach a class. And the teachers can spend 3 hours off campus getting their planning done for the week. Powerful. Powerful opportunities. Number 5, ensure achievement for all students through clear systems for prevention and intervention. Prevention and intervention. So for example, when you're at the Franklin Academy, when you come in as a new student, okay, there is a clear system. You take this assessment, shows you where you are reading and math and all those areas, and they quickly get you into the exact class where you need to be taught. And it provides you with intervention opportunities, okay, if you're falling behind, all right? And then so you're getting double dose of classes reading until you catch up to where your peers are. It closes the accountability loop, right? There's clear system for prevention and intervention. A lot of people say charter schools skim the top kids off. And after I did this, I argued, well, what if they're just really, really good at identifying the growth areas for students, and they got a system to teach them. So it's not that they're skimming the top kids. The kids never fall behind because they're paying attention. Because they're paying attention to what matters most. So what system do you have for prevention and intervention? Don't tell me about your response to intervention, your progress monitoring stuff. I mean, specifically, what happens to every kid who falls behind? Who's responsible for it? Okay? Who does what? That's a key one. If you want to ensure that your resources are used effectively, know what intervention tools and strategies work. So program evaluation. Know what work. Know that they're being used. Know that your staff is trained on them. And know that there's a clear system for the student to get the support that they need, whether it's during school, after school, whatever it is. It's clear, and everybody buys into it. Number 6, constantly research, train, and implement varying approaches to differentiation. This falls right into the category of ensuring achievement for all students, right? Because the hardest thing to do is differentiate in your classroom. It's hard when you're not open-minded and you haven't had the training for it, and it's not just it's who we are. It's a non-negotiable. What does differentiation look like at your school? I can tell you differentiation at my school didn't look like differentiation, because even though we had homogeneous groups, we still had groups within our groups. So it was always a struggle for us. But our teachers found ways to collaborate and work together. How to include direct instruction practices with whole group instruction, with projects, okay, with varying levels of educational tools, okay, implementing technology, using the outdoors, using stories, using guest speakers, teaching 101, moving our schedules around. Last but not least, number 7, research and implement effective systems to recruit, hire, and retain dedicated members of the learning organization. Why are successful schools successful for so long? Because they got the same people improving and mastering their craft. If you read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, 10,000 hours, right? To become an expert at something, 10,000 hours of time. How can you get 10,000 of hours with your staff if you're turning over every year or two, right? If you're not a strong culture to work in. How can you get 10,000s of hours if you're changing every year the strategy of the week, right? The strategy of the year. Oh, we're moving to this system, we're moving to this program. Look, it says right here, it works. Guaranteed to work. It's not a floor cleaner. These are kids' lives. This is a culture of your school. It's the success of the long-term sustainability. And to do that, you need to be able to go out and you got to know who you are and you got to sell your school. And I'll always tell you this, people don't quit organizations. People quit other people. So, 2 things. First, the law of magnetism. If you're not getting very good recruits to your school, take a look in the mirror. Because it could be because you're just not a very good organization that people want to work at. The word in the street is people don't want to come here. All right, law of magnetism. You are who you attract. You are who you attract. So, where do we recruit, hire, and retain dedicated members of the learning organization? Great story. Had a principal who used to come and substitute for me. His name is escaping me. But I used to just bring him in just to learn from him because I was a first-time principal. He would teach me everything. And I'd say, well, where did you get your teachers from? He goes, great leaders, always recruiting, right? You're always recruiting, you're always cultivating, you're always trying to find the best. Jim Collins is good to great, right? Everybody's heard the story. So he would say when he was in the school system, he would go once every month, and he would pick another school in his school system, and he would go visit the principal and do a walkthrough. He said, I just want to get some ideas and best practices. Hey, can you take me to your 3 best teachers? And the principal would be all excited. Oh my gosh, yeah, I can't wait to show you this person, blah, blah, blah. And he'd go, he'd watch the teacher teach, and he'd, write down their name, and you know what happened next. He sent them an email. Saw you in the class today. Man, you had those kids engaged. He built them up, and then he told them, if you're ever looking, I run X middle school and down here, and we're down by the beach, and would love for you to come down and visit our school, right? If you can't find individuals in the areas you're looking for, change your class, right? Go find them. It's your job to bring in great people. It's your job to be constantly recruiting, constantly selling your organization. That's why it's so important to know who you are, what you do, and where you're going. I remember specifically why I came to Chartered A School as a teacher. Because multiple times I applied in the school system to be working in central office exceptional children's department. And multiple times I was always told, oh my gosh, what a great interview, we chose someone else. The head of the Chartered A School organization, he said, our goal is to have 100 schools, in 10 years. And we're going to need a director of exceptional children. That person could be you. That was it. I was hooked. I didn't need to know anything else about the school, right? It goes back to that number 2. Expanded professional opportunities for your team, right? So know who you people are, right? Know what folks are looking for. They're not looking for more money. Research shows that, they're not looking for more money, even though you should pay them well, make sure you get your return on investment, but make sure you're treating them like professionals. So those were my 7, okay? My final thoughts. So my findings were very, very similar to Ron Edmonds' work, right? Almost dead on. But the great thing about, in our schools, we get to make real-time decisions. So is it as simple as that these schools were effective because of these 7? I don't necessarily think so. I think it's really goes back to that sustained telescopic but microscopic approach, right? You had the same founder, same vision, same understanding, and over time, right? Developing leadership from within and only bringing people from within the organization. So you're, constantly cultivating and you're growing, and the people are seeing people, grow. I think that was really, really important. This message from Rudy Swafford, I'll never forget it. Sitting in his office, he's now the principal of the other Greensboro, Summerfield Academy, I think. But at the time he was at Greensboro Academy, and I just said, so what advice would you give? I'm going to end with this final thought. He said, make sure you define and stay true to your program from day one. Make sure you do that so you bring in the students you want, or the students that need you. I'm going to say that again. Make sure you do that so you bring in the students you want, you need, or the students that need you. Deliver on whatever you promise, whatever that is. So, I believe in you. I know you're going to be paying attention to these 7. Don't try to attack all 7 at once. Pick one. Pick one of the 7 and start to take your microscopic lens and dive down into it. All right? But remember, everything starts